Here we go. That
He
should be
apparently
rolling.
had 4 teeth violently crushed and ripped out.
Ah,
Oh yeah, same.
yeah. Root
Can
canals
mention that.
are never fun, but
No, those are
8.
something else.
it's good that you got it fixed up, regardless. So,
Indeed.
to lead us off, we had a pretty good tournament in terms of performance. Had no issues there. There was 1 or 2 instances of some of the blocker plates causing some interesting issues that we haven't really seen before. We're still chasing that down. We know how to fix it. If it becomes a problem during the middle of a match, just delete the block plates, but it's more about specifically why. And that's it. Let's get started. Overall experience, leaning towards pretty good. Some for too long. Yeah, I agree. Got a bit long in the tooth there near the end, especially on account of me having to stay up overnight to correct some issues with my system. The last possible second as I was trying to build a bracket that was suboptimal.
Yeah,
First
a
up,
series of unfortunate events.
TIO. Be good across the board for the first stuff. Type 15, Peacemakers, Tridents. Maybe not the Odex. Anything else looking pretty alright. Are people using these anymore? Lol, 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 lol. So, there's Endroth.
Yeah, that person, everyone was using them.
Type 21 listed here. Is that true? Yeah, Type 21 isn't there.
Yeah, that was me. I actually the Type 21 hasn't been in the feedback for ever. I just noticed.
Okay.
We'll get that corrected.
Tibbs would like to take a moment to remind everyone once again, if you tell me it's not there, then I can go fix it. Please
Okay,
just
Tibbs, it's not
ping
there.
me.
Tibbs, it is not there.
Yeah.
It's not there,
At
Tibbs.
It is not there. All right. Problem
Thank
corrected.
you.
It's really forgettable since they use the exact same icon and are pretty much the exact same gun.
Well, it is.
They're
two
not,
barrels.
though.
No, it's like 2 a Type 18 strapped together with more
Yes, I
integrity.
know.
It was
That
a
fire is
7.
faster.
Extrude
I
tool.
know.
It was a chip house. Anyway, 317 notes. There we go.
Thank you.
Slide that
That's
at the
it.
side. Okay. Add type 21 to feedback. There we go. Vulnerable to point defense. We'll get back to this. Don't let me forget this point. It's going to be a whole thing about it. There we go. Okay, so as for giving the LBX a slight buff, we'll also get back to that in relation to everything else. Yeah, not a lot of feedback there overall. That isn't going to be addressed when we get back around to the AMS stuff. What did you just send me here?
Notes I took
Yeah,
yesterday.
thank you. And weapons. They're functional. Railgun is quite popular. Guided rocket turret, a bit less. Scatling turret, a little bit less. No funny lasers or shotgun turrets. Minus 100 social credit, lol. Very useful comment. Would someone please think of the children and add these to the dossier? I think they were, weren't they?
For 60.
He said he would not be available for today, so I will just need to remember what we discussed last night together. I'm pretty sure they're on the point or the dossier. If they're not, let me know.
I mean, it's not like anyone can check. Let's see. They do not appear to be.
I thought he put them on, or was he gonna wait till after?
Not even the
Vanilla
experimental
railgun.
mean guns.
Railgun's on there.
Oh, yeah, that's because it's been for a while. The rest of it was re-added abruptly with no fanfare at all.
Yep.
weren't really changed after the Great Rebalance, so there you go. Mirroring the comments, performing. If
Yes,
anyone did testing on these.
those are found and fixed. They used the wrong type of AoE.
All right, easy.
Oh yeah.
Moving on to North Heavy Industries. Veneers, just fine. Soders, for the most part, just fine. Acers, just fine. Gungners, we'll come back to those. Mag coils, kind of also going to come back to those. Fenrir, those ones had a little bit of a... I don't know if I want to call it an identity crisis, but they're definitely... The projectiles should be a little faster. Jotun, I believe those are pretty quick already. Might need to be tuned. Hurricanes, pretty good. Mark 1, 2, and 3. We'll come back to those again. Now I'm saying that a lot. Heimdall, just fine. PD, because of arbitrary reasons. We'll come back to that. And that, and that, and that. There's no issues. Okay. So, for the most part, mechanically speaking, shooting thing at thing without considering point events, which we'll come back to again, they're fine. And no weapons. Pretty much across the board. Evening it out on just right and too weak. Come back to the Gladius in just a sec. For the most part, the lasers are doing what they're supposed to be doing. T4 maybe not. Derecho is also not. So, on the point of us suddenly having really good performance, we don't need to be as persistently, constantly strict about things being an issue just for performance reasons, not for balance reasons. So we can look into adjusting the points on the ratios and their integrity and all that to make them less, yeah, they exist, but don't bring them to a state of, yeah, they're fine. 2 slingers equals 1/2 of the Punisher. Woe be the power creep, for it has reared its ugly head. These guns don't seem useful anymore, and lasers generally don't have the punch to kill shields unless you have them in a significant amount. And power to justify bringing them. That being said, 300 megawatt draw, electricity spitter on fast ships is also shown why bother with 4-kilometer range when I can go 300 per second, use my thrust to use cringe electricity splitter within 800 meters and laugh as lasers harmlessly take down shields, laugh over rate by comparison. Yes, okay, so believe we'll get to the chiasms down the list, but Invalid's already done some things to those.
Terrible things.
Tigers
Some
and Slingers
things, he
should
says.
have a large aim tolerance now. If they're not, report the bug. That's right. Could not produce or reproduce them not firing after we made some tweaks. Gladius is falling behind. 2-point inefficient per damage be easily justified. I think should have slightly reduced power draw. Let's see. So keep that in
used them.
mind and keep bulldozing through here because we have a few things to talk about with power. Arcs weapons. Punisher, saw that coming. Magnetar, pretty good. Arnos, pretty good. Paulo, a little weaker, still fine. Tempest, a little weaker. Back to this again with the point defense thing. Focus beam's alright. Hunter's alright. Air's fine. Helios, surprisingly fine considering how it actually performed, where it was really only able to do something on grids that were more or less crippled entirely, kind of like a finishing weapon that you could just yeet at the grid and let them do something about it. Not really something that was useful in mainline combat, as far as I could tell. But Mark just fine. Doppler, falling behind. Maybe should be a bit stronger. Like that the blue berry's got a new model. It's light damage buff, but I thought we removed them for good reasons. I like the comment that you're just making here.
We did. Don't worry. And we will again.
So, I get it. Punisher seemed just a touch strong, but not by much, so please don't nerf them too hard. Well, we'll get to that point in a second again. I realize I'm saying that a lot. I'm not supposed to try gaslighting people into thinking Punishers aren't doing damage while watching Punisher spam cut people in half. You're supposed to wait until the bounce cancel. It never works in real time. Jeez. Lol, 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 lol. Okay, so I will offer a genuine apology for what I said on stream. What I said was it wasn't the Punishers that were killing people, it was the positioning and the tactics that people were using and the chiasms that were doing the real damage. While ships were being kind of sandblasted front to back by the Punishers, what I meant was the actual dangerous part of the Punishers was the chiasms digging in and killing all the components while the Punishers did the armor damage. That's what I ended up saying. I'm sorry. And I
That's
made
fine,
some
you're
shirtless
fine.
comments about the counters that you could do. Yeah, just fling Tempest at them. It's fine.
How dare
That-
you English wrong?
That I did say, and it did mean I didn't think about it hard enough. And I apologize.
I mean, I think you were not wrong for saying those things personally, because like the Punisher is not a problem by itself in a vacuum. I think that was apparent to a lot of people.
And the chiasms really were.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's the kind of problem because we actually went through. I'll break away from the feedback here. We went through update by update for all of the mods that were pushed after the Great Rebalance, and in grand total, the weapons that have received any just does more damage buffs was extremely rare. Mostly on just brand new stuff or stuff that was introduced after the rebalance or reintroduced after rebalance, and it wasn't really a case of everything sliding up. It's just these more problematic combinations appearing as people try new things after moving away from a bunch of the heavy guns for being point defense vulnerable, and we'll get back to that again. And continuing on with this comment, it's got its drawbacks, pretty good. Weak shield damage currently only real negative, pretty easy to round 2. And all just, yeah, pretty much what we said here. And this was an interesting point. Sharons are shorter range and very expensive for level gain, have worse proc per minute per point. Because the Sharons were designed very specifically with it in mind that you had to use it awkwardly. Like it's a big heavy gun, it can do big heavy things, but you have to be at a certain angle, you gotta hold it. And it's not something that you could just whip around. So what ended up happening with the Punishers is, I believe, either the traverse rate was or already high and increased, or was just high to begin with. So you have a very fast traversing gun that fires very quickly and goes out to an okay, decent range. But the point is you don't really need to think too hard about using it when you're using it, because it traverses so quickly. Unlike the Sharon, where you have to be really, really particular about it, which means the Sharons are always going to be at a disadvantage versus something that is in a similar kind of idea bracket, if you want to call it like that. So I have some ideas to discuss about that once we're done here. Increasing range would be pointless. Make shield damage even worse. Make comp damage as like the Cyclops. So I believe the Punishers are already not that great at component damage on account of them being shotguns and spreading all the damage everywhere, which is why the Chiasm's being combined with them in the same breath, which is a very fixed point of damage that is very high, very fast, and relatively pretty easy to use. That turns out to be a problem. Imagine a timeline where someone did the math and said Punishers should be 300 battle points, giving the heavy armor blocks per minute values being wrong in the dossier. Well, it's kind of the problem with just adding buffs to stuff because people aren't bringing them, even if the only buffs are, realistically speaking, just making the weapon function properly and giving them a pretty particle effect. Any sort of high fire rate turret with good hit rate needs a burst with 10-second reload or heat. I'm not sure if I totally agree with that assessment just blankly, because there's a few other options, such as reducing the traverse rate, reducing the angles it can traverse to, so make it a little bit harder to actually utilize, especially when you're whipping your mouse across the room. Range is less relevant. More or less, I can agree with that. Otherwise, they need to be absolutely fucking pulverized in the dirt next to the slinger where they belong, to the point of just being essentially reskins DPS-wise. Must be applied to the Punisher, Acer, Stairs, Reavers, even the shitty vanilla assault turret. That would be pitiable. I'll get back to that. Otherwise, just a rotation between flavor of the month. Ensure the damage is so bad that risking taking a weapon with shells that can be shot down is a risk worth taking. We'll get back to that. Failure to do this would make you that kid has picked up the UMP 45 plus attack in certain Modern Warfare 2. Hunters could use points or power drop as focus beams, especially Hellfires, have power crept them in the energy fixed weapon department. We have a little bit of discussion on the Hellfires that was done last night, which I'll get back to. Tempests are regarded by some as being a bit weak. Not sure myself. Not sure myself either, provided they all hit.
I was about to say, me and Tysel were doing some armor damage, and Tempests were consistently the only weapons that literally didn't care about specialized armor. Like, they just punched through everything in equal measure.
When we talk about the Sylvius, remind me about the Tempest, please.
Yep.
Thank you. Okay. Serpent Arm Starcore. Erebus, pretty good. Edging on too strong. Asterius, well, look at that. I think that's the highest red bar I've seen on it so far, and we haven't made any material changes. I did actually make a change to prove a point by increasing the projectile speed, which was reversed by Invalid realizing that I was trying to make a point with an update, which was the correct option, as the Asterius that were actually used in the tournament hit the targets just fine, even the fast movers from decently long range. Sylvius, ER, Gauss turret. Well, we're already here. Actually, we'll get back
I
to
get
that.
the Tempest.
We'll get back to that. Sharon, 2 weak. Now, the question that I would posit is that 2 weak in comparison to other options you could bring, or in general?
Yes.
Yes.
That was 2
So
In
options.
other
general,
options.
it's too weak,
Take-
and there's
Take
also weak.
900 points of reverse, and you absolutely humiliate the Charon, and you're about equal
Yeah.
power draw. So
Not only that, it's like just it has it's a big expensive gun, so even if it didn't outdo like 9 Reavers, like you can lose an entire Sharon to like 1 lucky fixed weapon barrage, where you still have the redundancy advantage with multiple
Doesn't-
smaller weapons.
doesn't the Charon have like 500k integrity though?
I mean, it'll still get gimped by like an Ares or something, so
Or a Hellfire boat.
or a Hellfire. Yeah.
Yeah,
Like,
it's a
they're-
large fixed point investment, and it's awkward to use. And it was designed at a point in time where the meta was quite a bit heavier, where your fast ships were very specifically one thing, and your heavier ships were very specifically the other thing, and you could jump on a fast ship with a Sharon, and it wouldn't be very effective at the time. That was before the PD thing, which we get back
I
to.
remember when it was supposed to be a painter only 6-kilometer piss gun of green.
Yeah, unfortunately couldn't get
That
that
was
to work quite right. Cerberus, get back to you, I'm sorry. Somnus, pretty good. Hydra, kind of up and down all over the place. The testing that I've done on my own, and when I've had it used against me, it seems pretty decent. So kind of hesitant to touch that too much. It's probably in a fine relatives position.
Hydra's fine.
Grimlock's all right. Hellfire, this one, we've been talking about it off and on. So the Hellfire, its model was never completely finished, as 60 was going to commission Chet to make a new model for him, but Chet was,
Decomputed.
yeah, he was decomputered, like dehorsed. Unfortunately, he will be unavailable for a while, so one of the interim solutions that came up with was adding a exclusion zone around the Hellfire in the relative space that it should take up, and I believe it's supposed to be like a 2x2x5 or something like that, like larger than it is. So the idea is to just increase the exclusion zone to fit that narrative. So we don't need to swap out the model or anything, and just have it exclude all weapons, so it's as if it was bigger for now. So you can't just put like 4 next to each other, for example. Sharon's turn radius is a bit lacking, could barely make targets even when assisted by player movement, which is not the intent. So tune in Sharon reverse and other movement stats. A lot like that. Increase Hydra and Grimlock reload rate. Increase Sylvia's component damage. Get back to that, sorry. Bring back Rainbow Hellfires. That one would have to be a subtype if we don't want the Hellfires to just be Rainbow all the time, because the reason that the Rainbow ammo was removed, or rather the reason why
It
greenlit
added
that,
8 other ammos.
is I thought that it would be possible to be able to switch between Rainbow mode and normal mode, you know, just in case you wanted Rainbow mode. Turns out that wasn't the case, and I found that out afterwards. Kind of unfortunate. Increased durability across the board for this pack, since they don't keep up with the other flavor of weak packs in this area. So this is not the direction that I agree with, of just buffing things to whatever. I'm not saying everything needs nerfs. It's just very specific combinations should be dialed in.
Mm.
Sylvius again. Okay, we might as well talk about this. So one of the ideas for the Sylvius originally was that it had the main projectile and then a secondary projectile as a fragment. Now, the idea was if you're firing at long range, you're probably going to be shooting at somebody not in front dead center, so they'd be running away from you, so you'd go through one of their shunts. And then you might hit a block that overpenetrate, and then you'd still have that fragment, which would hit the backside of the shield and do extra shield damage. It's a bit complicated and didn't really work in theory, and a few things changed here and there. So one of the ideas that 60 came up with, I was actually on board with, which was splitting out the damage between pretty good armor damage and pretty good component damage between two fragments. So the first projectile would have all of the component damage, and the second projectile would have all the armor damage. So if you had armor and then a component, it wouldn't destroy the component, it'd just destroy armor. If you had a component, it would destroy the component, not destroy the armor behind it, in theory. That's kind of the change that we're thinking of making to the Sylvius. Whether or not
That
that's
make-
a brilliant idea, I think it's a better idea than the one that currently exists with it.
Would that make it unable to kill large reactors inside a ship, though?
It would count on your other weapons opening up big holes in the armor, or it would count on you hitting the same spot a few times.
Translation: snipe all the turrets off from X range instead of snipe all of the power.
Now, the first projectile can have a fall off on it that we control for, so it does not do heavy component damage after a fixed range. So once you're getting closer range, then you can do more component damage, otherwise you're just doing armor damage at longer ranges. And that was one of the ways around that. So you wouldn't be, say, just clicking off all of Tumor's thrusters with 8 Sylvius. You would be going through his armor at 7 kilometers at most.
Wouldn't that just be buffing the fast movers because they're
Well-
more inclined to weapon strip rather than,
In
kill
theory,
the thing buried underneath
I-
heavy armor?
if you have a
I'm
light
inclined
fast
to
grid
agree with him on that.
and you strip off all the armor on it, and then you hit it again, now you're stripping your components off. Now, this isn't going to massively increase the amount of damage it's doing. It's just kind of splitting it and dividing it around a bit to be more specific. So you get nice big punchy holes, or you get more component damage, but you don't get both at the same time, is the idea.
Mm.
In theory. We'll see how well it works.
Probably wouldn't use that, but yeah, that's me.
Muzzled.
Yes.
Is your OBS trying to do the side stream?
Oh, the little... Yes, it is.
Okay. Yeah, Tate pointed it out in the Twitch chat, and I was like,
Yeah, this one.
ah.
What do you
Thank
know?
you. Okay.
Yeah,
So splitting the damage either way, increasing a little bit
Yeah.
in some cases, that would be relatively equivalent to dropping its points. We can also just drop its points.
Mm.
This turret is meant to be close to a monopole by its points at the moment. Well, again, the monopole is kind of its own beast. It's an ungodly massive rotary cannon. I'm not sure if it can be
Monopole
compared
is
with
funny.
a turret like this.
Mm.
The Sharon being so widely inefficient compared to its competitors. Yeah, I can agree with that. So either making it more efficient or just dropping its points a bit. Might be all the Sharon needs, or a little bit of tune-up on its maneuvering just a bit. Shields are the unwanted redhead stepchild of the long-range weapons. No one wants to bring them because they're the only semi-good at one thing, and that's light armor damage. And that's what I was kind of trying to change, or what we were trying to change with that idea of doing all armor damage or all component damage, not doing both at the same time, so we don't result in ships getting clicked apart at long range, but they're still doing something. Sylvia suffered good bars with a super low component damage. Yeah. So if the idea fails with the split damage, we'll try this instead. Pretty good. Everyone is avoiding the elephant in the room, which is hydras are overbaked, at least in testing, yet no one is using them. I wonder why that is. Which leads me to believe that certain teams are saving them for the GT. Sylvius, Cerberus, and Asterius, to a lesser extent, suffer from the dilemma of being underperforming for the roles, but quickly becomes overpowered when made better. I'd recommend point drops across the board instead of tweaking any numbers at this point, which I can agree with. Hellfires are slightly overcooked, which seems to be on purpose. I have serious doubts of parity in a team-based competition when the modders are said members of teams and therefore cannot be completely unbiased in their weapon tuning. In cases like these, weapons like these have to be looked at harder, which we did. And they do have fall off down to a significant percentage after a given range. I'm gonna try just the exclusion zone to see if that brings them into line, make them a little bit harder to use. Because I don't really want to fuck with them too badly, if that makes any sense. Because they are a fine and fun weapon. Talos in the YouTube chat saying nerf crossfield and PT generally. Buff bombers, we'll get back to that. Sorry.
Someone uses that chat? Holy shit.
Yeah, I'm watching it, but I didn't mention it because I already told him we'll do it later.
Yep. Serve a buff. Talk about it then. Otherwise, discard this. Put the Asteris on the test platform with Ace or Hurricane's Punishers, even after less should have arrows. TSA, please left Asteris, I know what guy. Just a little bit of a heavy armor blocks per minute per point and go from there. Well, if it is just a slight heavy armor modifier change, that's not the end of the world. And if that's all they need, perfect. If they instead need 25 points taken off, perfect. There we go. Okay. Recore. Magnetic monopole cannon, pretty popular. Despite it being an ungodly huge rotary cannon, there have been some hints of a meta forming around the idea of using them as kind of a assault cannon, I guess.
They might be a bit funny for 1,000 points, even with considering their size and everything, to be honest.
Well, you're not really going to be spamming them, and if you are, then
Well, you don't need to spam them, that's the thing.
you bring a
You need-
decent point, and they can be quite a lot.
Their critical volume is 2, and with 2 of them you can basically lick through most tanks in a silly amount of time, which is really not a hard thing to do with a WM1 gun that does not have a downside, like cooldown, whatever.
So what happened during the match then?
We brought like nothing but fixed weapons and skill issued ourselves on tactics and still managed to kill 2 ships like almost entirely. What do you mean?
I
Well-
don't know what you're talking about. Dylan was at
Yeah, right. Dylan was at full volume.
He was at 70% combat effectiveness.
It is silly because
You peeled the potato?
most of us were not even really aiming them, so whatever hit Dylan was just like some random piss. I just feel like they're entirely too strong, but
Now, are they
Yeah.
too strong on their own or in comparison?
yes, they do everything. They are the comparison. I took them, if you take a Hydra, which I kind of equate to similar to them since they're both long-range kinetic guns. Hydras just get outclassed by them a whole lot, and it's not like a 400 point disadvantage difference. Sorry. Like I think they do like a hunter shot each shot, right? The monopoles.
Not exactly. Their pattern is similar, but not exactly
Yeah.
the same
Well,
amount of damage.
I just think for something with global range or near global range, that has no overheat mechanic, no power draw, it's really not that hard to build a long ship and stick 2 of them on it. I don't know. I just think they do too much, 2 shields and 2 armor.
Would power
but-
draw, not an ungodly massive amount, I'm not talking about like a gigawatt, just a equivalent amount of power draw to the damage they are currently doing. Would that correct all of your concerns with it, or is the fact that you can do that kind
Not
of damage
really.
with the weapon the problem? So if
I mean,
global
here's the
range you
thing, right?
mentioned,
They're a fixed weapon, so that like kind of weeds out most of the quote unquote problems.
Yeah,
But
I'm not huge about.
I can't imagine it was being fun for Dylan to just hold W in a tank and get melted by them across the map and do literally nothing about it.
So
Do
speaking
literally
as
nothing about it.
Dylan's teammate, Spartan, what do you say to that?
Well, I do have I think Turnip is not completely wrong there. I do feel like if like the theory about them, I think he's absolutely right, and they do a lot of damage. I mean, when Dylan was getting focused, his ship was literally falling apart. I mean, it did look a lot with the Dylan. That weapon is also like like the way Dylan completely, I mean, the way Dylan designed his ship, that weapon is like the kryptonite to that too. So it looked a
My
lot worse than
my
it
main
was.
issue is the range because when
But
they got added in, they were a 5 kilometer weapon and that grew to 15 for some reason.
Take a look at the
I
range next weapon.
I was gonna say, yeah, I think just putting it on a shorter range so people don't sit across the map like spamming it would be like enough of a fix.
I'll put that with a strong question mark in parentheses, and we'll march forward and come back to that. SRMs, they no longer kill you. That's cool. When you launch them and they decide that the target is on the other side of you. It's really about all there is to say about that. MRMs just in their weird position as they always are. LRMs are working just fine. I wonder if anybody noticed their new behavior of how they fly in kind of a circular swarm on their way to the target. That was kind of my quick fix for just drilling all the way through ships, because if the missiles converge when they're kind of within dorsal range, I guess, of the target, they're not all going to hit the exact same point and drill straight through it. They're going to mess up the whole ship, not just one spot. So I think they're in a better place than they were, definitely. Arrows, they are a little weird. Up and down. And I think there's been some strange visibility issues with them. Kind of blinking into and out of existence. I haven't really been able.
When they hit, they seem to do plenty of damage. So
Yeah,
effectiveness, they seem fine.
I think it's more about the prevalence of extremely effective point defense. They're relatively slow speed, they're high cost, large size, and so on. The weapon itself in a vacuum doesn't really have any issues. Now, for the PPCs, Invalid decided to bring these back from the dead and leave them in a interesting state. I forget, again, if they have EWAR on them right now.
They do.
They do.
They're grid limited to 4.
I
Their
believe the
damage overall has dropped to a very sad level.
yeah.
Yep.
Personally, I kind of preferred it when they were contact fuse, shorter range, slower Tempest.
Tempest,
That didn't
yeah,
do EWAR, but
same.
Yeah, the numbers are off because I didn't have them in the beginning, I think.
Make them Electric Tempest reskins then in the future.
well, that's kind of what they were. Moving on. The large and medium lasers, which we're going to get a pass on them to make them behave a little bit more like the Hellfires rather than click bird. That doesn't really work the same way it does in MechWarrior, which is, of course, where they're from. The sound effects and the icons. Kind of. So, I don't know. What's the general feeling on that, making the medium and large laser the small and medium TM lasers to the Hellfire large laser? Kind of just different grades of the same weapon.
Probably make them more usable.
Yeah.
We'll call them. We could call them the chem laser, right?
If the laser's got a range buff, maybe I dip. I'm always leery about giving range buffs to lasers because they are one of those things where if you make them long enough, then they definitely will cause performance issues in the past. But currently it doesn't seem to be a huge issue. So extending that range out a bit, maybe adding a little bit of fall off on the larger end of the range. So you're good up to 3 kilometers at full damage. Then after that, up to 5, it dips off. Could be one way of doing that.
Sounds reasonable.
What's the current range on them? I believe it's
2.5, 3.5.
yeah, 2.5 and 3.5.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, late.
The UNN and MCRN, I already know why they're too weak. It's because the prevalence of extremely effective point defense, which we'll get back to. Painless and Baneless. So the Baneless was a late edition and still not technically complete, but man, does it look pretty, doesn't it? Sounds pretty good too.
I think it's nice.
So the original conceit with the Baneless is that it would be a slower, heavier, more overheat prone, more violent version of the Painless. And in the middle of testing and making sure that all the point defense could actually target and deal with projectiles, I cranked them up to a certain value to deal with bombers and never put it back down again, which is what their original implementation was, which is why they seem so overcooked. They didn't have their limiting feature. Now, they are still particularly strong for a couple reasons. A lot of it, I'll just talk about the PD thing right now. So we were in a position to begin with the point defense of, it was basically either the apes was too strong or too weak based entirely on how much damage it did. So we changed a few things around and then made the point defense be able to deal with more targets. They wouldn't get panicked as easily. They wouldn't lock onto stuff they couldn't hit, and so on and so on and so on. Then we made all the shells vulnerable at the same time. Then we started adding more effective and interesting weapons, like the crossfield, for example, which is one of the more interesting point defense weapons I've ever seen. Well, that's pretty good with dealing with a whole bunch of stuff flying around, obviously. And its values are tuned to deal with, well, high health things that are in swarms. But if there's no high health things in swarms, because everybody's using the spammy guns that don't have point defense health, that means there's no chaff TM to distract missiles and anything else that can be shot at with point defense. So one of the thoughts that we came up with was the Great Rebalance was before that change to point defense. And it is probably a good solution to just scratch point defense, being able to shoot at shells across the board, just delete the AMS health and make sure it's tuned properly for exactly what it's supposed to be for. It was a good experiment and supposed to reduce incoming damage from the heavier guns by a fixed percentage. Now that worked just fine up until people stopped bringing the heavier stuff. Then the rate of heavy stuff flying around went down, the effectiveness of point defense went up at the same time, and having less targets to shoot at to begin with made them even more effective. This was a self-reinforcing cycle. And
just add more health, bro.
You could add more health. But then you just bring...
Just add more damage, bro.
Yeah, and so on and so on and so on. So it is probably a much better solution for us to just scratch point defense, AMS health off of all of the non-smart stuff the way it was before, the way we had it set up, and the way we had it balanced. That way, that gives all of the heavier stuff back its position of being nice and powerful. We don't need to go in and nerf the bejesus out of all the faster firing stuff, because then you'd have the heavier stuff to help deal with it. All this secondary weaponry being spammed. Because if you have the longer range, higher damage guns, you can deal with a small little shit fast mover holding W at you, because they get crumped by a bunch of high explosive shells slamming into them that they can't shoot down instantly. Make sense?
Sure.
So
It was a good experiment, and it sort of worked like we thought it was going to,
yeah, the
and then it didn't.
execution worked, the theory worked, but the intended effect didn't materialize for a couple of reasons. Like I said, with the compounding effectiveness of the point defense, its changes in targeting, its inflated damage values, and so on and so on and so on. Moving on. The Baneless is just a straight up better Heim than Painless, and it's not supposed to be.
Yep. I'll have a solution for that.
I tried to get in front of this problem. I thought I had tuned it down into reasonable levels. It was
Yeah, you
many
made it.
times worse than it was.
You made it from it is entirely like the only thing you should bring, and it's the greatest and the best because that's what I was using it for, the kinetic point defense and testing, down to a more reasonable level of, well, now it's just better. It doesn't necessarily need to be better. There's a few ways around this, one of which is giving it a slower traverse rate, giving it a reload, giving it an overheat, and all these little tweaks and details, and of course just reducing its AMS damage. Grid
I
damage
suggest
analysis.
not trying to add and balance a brand new weapon and simply making it a side grade to the painless.
And that'd be a pretty decent idea. Even if it's literally exactly the same as just a reskin, that would also be fine. Because it sounds on the cool. Yeah, whatever. Baneless has been power crept overnight by baneless and crossfields. So the baneless, yes, the crossfields kind of tied into what I said before about the shell stuff. They were tuned to deal with shells, and then there's less shells flying around, and so on and so on and so on. You've heard this before. A few minutes ago, in fact. Let's see. Give lasers a buff 2. Currently, they lack niche chasms punishers. Fill the ultra short range bracket. Hellfire
He's
is
close.
performed very well in all other brackets. These weapons don't serve much of a purpose other than filling points. Either consolidate them into the Hellfire or shape them into some kind of niche. So, yeah, I'll probably take a look at the PPCs again and set them up as designated and designed as a, well, HE Tempest side grade. Experimental special mods.
Just if you make them what they used to be, but just literally choppy or off, they would be perfect.
That is my plan.
Hey,
Experimental and special. Link drive, just right. I tend to agree. Actually, I think they've finally settled down. You get the occasional hero blink, you get the occasional telefrag, but you're not watching Spartan do the Mario parallel universe thing around the arena.
I'm not happy about that. I demand my power back.
That's okay.
No.
You'll just have to prove how good you are by designing ships for half the fucking field. Lol. Arc emitter. One more.
All right, I'll take it from here.
Go ahead.
What do you get when you cross 2,300 shield damage for 100-point weapon?
I don't know.
You get a spectator camera, right-click reactor weapon.
Ah.
I have removed to 0. It is still competitive in shield damage. Why? How did this get through?
Is it though?
According to the chart, yes.
According to the chart alone. Now, this is possibly
So,
an
here's the
overreaction
thing,
in
right?
terms of damage, and it can be tuned good from here.
Here's the thing. This is a 1 kilometer gun with a 50% drop off at max range. that
Irrelevant
starts-
on a thruster stick.
Sure, but thruster sticks, as you saw, get zapped around by lasers and Tartarus. So, on any other ship, they are basically useless now because he will simply not be in range long enough for them to do damage.
Yep.
And yeah, so
Anyway, Janik has given us a post here, and I was going to say basically the same thing. Okay. The 90% nerf brings the arc emitter from the 55th percentile net damage per point, 9 to 15k, to literal point defense tier damage from 900 to 1500, even ignoring power draw. They're pretty mid stat-wise. Funding number is high, but that is the whole point. Why would I want to jam my face in the enemy and not at random? It's also the whole rule of cool thing. Chasms are a sadly unique weapon that frankly looks cool as fuck. Thanks, chat. Utterly killing a thing because someone found a niche strat seems a bit absurd to me, which I agree on paper. When the weapon totally removes the ability to do anything about a ship when it comes at you with punishers as well is where I start questioning things. 90%? Too much.
So why not just nerf a part of it that is being cancerous and not the whole thing?
That is
Say,
also my
component
theory.
damage.
And I
What
wasn't
do
going
you
to push.
suggest instead?
I suggest
Nerf
testing it
its
and finding
component
the correct
damage.
values rather than just chopping an entire zero off knee jerk before the balance council, which is what we'll be doing. Tuning it
Of
in to
course,
put it
it
into
was a
nice
proposed
position.
change. I
Yeah.
labeled it.
It's a proposed change. So we found too little. So
Speaking of proposed changes, I think it was skipped over with the Punishers, but is the proposed change for the Punishers staying too? I think it was a double reload with double aim variance.
the invariance, probably not. The reload, probably not doubled, but it was certainly too fast before.
Hmm.
Especially in critical mass. But, tuned it in properly instead of just chopping big numbers off. So we know what the minimum is now. We know what the maximum is where it was. Somewhere in between, but we can find it.
Okay, yeah, I was just wondering since like the chasm is not going to be a problem with it anymore.
Also, one more thing. The reason chasms were as popular as they are is not because of damage, not because you had to go close. It's because literally 90% of the other guns that did similar or more damage in a different playstyle get cocked by the enemy having PD. So,
Which
yeah.
is kind of why
So-
I'm walking back some of these changes here and kind of countermanding
Yeah,
invalid.
so-
If we are removing AMS health from the majority of the heavy weapons, there isn't such a need to hyperfixate on nerfing a very interesting weapon down into nothingness just because it made one tournament a little spicy. That is an overreaction.
Are we going to have to nerf all the other weapons that are now not PDable so that the time to kill suddenly becomes much higher? Try lower.
Well, don't worry, because even if I wanted this next tournament, whether it's the qualifiers for the grand tournament or 318 or any combination between, Shields had a bit of a change, didn't they?
Right.
So there's a
I was
few
gonna ask us.
parts about that.
Did-
Yeah, we can take a detour right here. So the way the shield change
Darkstar.
works,
8.
Thank you.
I will pull
Very
it up
good.
on screen to show you exactly what is going on here. Scripts, defense shields. Is it config control?
It was shield init dot CS or something.
Yeah, right here.
Was
Okay.
it walk back or did we just change the config?
All right. So you see this little list right here?
Yeah.
What this is looking for is the subtype ID and the exact amount of power it has. If either of these don't match, it counts as a modded reactor or battery, and it does not apply whatever it's doing. So as an interim solution that I could implement extremely quickly and minimally affect everything, I have changed the amount of power that the small reactors and batteries output by subtracting 1 megawatt from each. I've also subtracted 1 point from each. The large reactors got an extra megawatt of power added. Now, this is not the end of the world kind of change, but it also just decoupled us from this shit. Now, I don't hate the idea of changing power around a little bit. Actually, in Season 4, I want to do some more interesting things with power, doing some, like with the gyro upgrade modules, doing that, but have the upgrade module be like a bar that you can twist around and do some interesting shapes with. That I'm on board with, but I would like to be in control of what's happening, and I would like power to equal power. Because the way this is set up is your power isn't good enough. You need a certain kind of power. How much power do you have in large reactors versus small reactors versus battery? That's all different with this setup. So what I've already implemented is you need to do nothing to your ship. And if you were heavily utilizing batteries in small reactors, well, you have some more points to play with. You get a bit less power, yeah. And if you're using large reactors, you get a whole megawatt of power with no added points. That's the current solution. Now, there is another solution that I can implement that'll put us exactly back where we were before, but it requires a bit more screwing around, where I would essentially implement a Starcore large reactor, Starcore small reactor, Starcore battery, and so on. And it would just be a vanilla whatever, it'd just have a different subtype AD. And all I would do is run a script that would look for any of these blocks when you spawn a ship in. And if it finds them, it swaps them for their equivalent. And I could reverse this by just flipping the logic around, so you just install another mod to reverse it. But I figured less change required on the player side is probably superior. And I definitely didn't want to force all players to just remove all of their power equipment to replace it with modded TM reactors that are just modded to be exactly the way that they were before.
This is a result of Darkstar probably going on a survival server and seeing how many shields a brick of 800 batteries gave or something. I
That's
don't know.
Or like he saw the server, realized people spam nothing but small reactors, and was like, "Holy shit, cringe."
Well, I
'Cause we
remember
were-
an exact. Oh,
we were in the
sorry.
position
Anyway.
of like getting a good mix of power. Like on every ship, you'd see a few large reactors, and then you'd see a bunch of batteries or small reactors as redundancy. And there's design, there's theory to it, and changing how much power you get equivalently actually applied to your shields based on what you bring. I didn't agree with that.
Right.
It was a bit much.
All right. So the large reactors went up 1 megawatt,
That's correct.
and the small and the battery went down 1 megawatt.
And they went down in 1 point. So if you had 200 batteries, you now have 200 extra points.
Does that keep the ratios in check though?
Yep.
Yeah.
I
pretty much.
tested it pretty exhaustively. There's like a little bit of variation from where it was before, but it's no longer like a ship gets 16 million versus 30
Replace all of your
million.
power with large reactors for 40% free shields.
Free shields.
Free shields. So somebody with the same amount of power as somebody else might have massively different shield numbers for
It was
no
funny
consistent
watching
reason.
Bryce's ship go from like 19 to 28 million overnight.
That
Screw
was
that.
suboptimal. So this is the change we've decided to implement. Hopefully it's agreeable. If it's not, I can do the other method of adding Starcore vanilla reactors and just automatically switching all of your stuff so you don't need to do anything. That is an option, but it will take me some time. It might break, and it will make all of your grids non-compatible with anything but Starcore unless you were to revert it somehow.
Let's do
Okay.
the less complicated option first.
Yeah, so that's already implemented. That's already in game.
There you go. It's not that much power, Janik.
You get free plus 1 point per battery.
Your 0.03 battle points. Yeah, so this was the cleanest solution that I can come up with that fucked with the minimum amount of things. Hopefully it works out, but it is going to be a minor difference.
Yeah, it'll be fine.
So you're saying the battery went from 12 megawatts, 12 points, or whatever, to 11 megawatts, 11 points.
12, 15 to 11, 14.
What the hell is this? Who's been touching my shit again?
I probably touched your shit. Apologies.
It's an overshield.
I remember
Oh.
there was a point in one of the test tournaments where Darkstar had commented on why drones were having such high shield numbers, and then we explained they were using only batteries and small reactors, and he was very offended. I'm pretty
Hey
sure
guys,
that was
remember to
one
ask
of the
Darkstar
things.
about dune shields.
God damn it, Spartan.
Anyway,
Yeah, no, that was the
Anyway.
tournament I brought drones. He's like, why are these shits have so much shields? That's not intended. And it's like, I don't know.
did you tell him about the shit ass regen that I have?
No, he only saw large numbers on small grid and was offended. That I'm pretty sure that's what kickstarted all this.
Darkstar got
Well-
God by his own mod. Holy shit.
Anyway, moving on.
Doesn't matter. We've corrected
Fixed it. Yeah.
There are many solutions. Next one.
Does more damage to both shields and blocks than any other energy-based weapon. Doesn't even need to cool down to reload. Put it on the grid, give it afterburners or a blink drive, and suddenly the strongest grid in the server. That isn't quite accurate. Did you guys nerf arc emitters last time? Is that a thing that happened? Just reduce its armor
No.
damage to a fraction of what it is, like you should have done weeks and months ago, and otherwise leave it alone. Lol lol lol, thank you, Endroth. The unfunny arc emitter needs to end. Give them an overheat or everyone will be bringing these. It has already started considering both teams in the finals utilize the funny spam guns.
What?
I've removed 0 from the arc emitter and it remains mid-tier at worst shield DPS. Originally had horrific passive draw, but we fell for the no one uses it meme. This time I won't. Just grid limit arcs at this point instead of the proposed 1/10 damage nerf, or remove them entirely. The defeatism. Anyway.
Are they
So
even that powerful though? Like, did they swing whole matches?
Yes.
I watched two of them utterly carve a ship apart while the Punishers removed all the armor. Because
Oh,
the,
so when they combined with other guns.
the reason that they synergize so nicely is because they can absolutely annihilate components, while the other stuff, particularly the Punishers,
That's the armor.
goes to the armor.
Imagine killing the super short range fast ship.
Well,
Hit to scan, high damage.
it's more the brawler runs up to pretty much any ship, including the heavily armored ships, and just instantly wipes out the entire front half of it.
I can name you 2 people who put chasms on anything heavier than a fucking 4 mil and actually did stuff with it. So, and
Well,
by that I mean like not as a deterrent. I mean like an actual
which
primary
is
weapon.
why I don't really agree with crushing their damage down to 1/10. That's an overreaction. We're not doing that.
There will be a
Who,
much
who are
elegant
those
solution.
people?
Demon
Yep.
Fox and me.
I thought we already talked about this.
Yep.
Actually, wasn't written down though.
There we go. Tune in probably. Done.
Based.
Moving on. 40k. Nova Cannon. There was a few really good shots from the Nova Cannon.
Oh yeah.
From MTD. And only MTD.
Hey, at least we were using them.
Nova Cannon seems to be the close range anti-large shield slapper at the moment. I think MTD probably got the best grip on it, but I don't think it's good at the moment. Too long reload, too like this, not enough impact for when it does. The reload
Yeah.
was left intentionally long by Darth for reasons involving like not needing to constantly click on the target with the fixed gun, but
I'll tell you the rationale we used for deploying it as a this is basically a field test on it from our perspective. And we wanted to see the efficacy of using it in our tank. I mean, as you saw, there were funny meme shots that we got in a couple times, but overall, it does suffer from taking a wee bit long to reload. And while I'm sure my guys would have a more comprehensive discussion if they were awake, I think the most pressing thing was it's just so long to reload.
yeah, well, we can go back and forth with Darth on this, but I don't think it'd be the end of the world to chop a few seconds off of that. More dip points.
Yeah, because I don't want to turn too many dials at once, and I think the dial that we should look at is just letting it shoot a little bit more often. That's all.
Starcore Heavy Assault. Nyx Mammon, pretty alright. Thanatos, too strong. Vulcan, pretty good. Tardos, pretty good. Coctus, pretty good. Dictum, pretty good. Cyclops, pretty good. Flare is really good. And Crossfield, too strong. Alright. Cyclops is very fun to use. And too bright, actually.
That was already fixed.
Coder's range is mildly annoying. What's the range of Cyclops, Eisen?
It's 4. That's
Or
4
That's
kilometers.
pretty
4 kilometer hit
standard.
scan weapon.
For a hit scan
Not
weapon.
hits. Well,
Yeah, probably much if it had longer range. Crossfields are great. Love the visual on stream, but the particle seems kind of muted as a player. Make sure you have your post-processing turned on, but there is something missing with the crossfield effect. I agree.
So something I might bring up here is they look very similar to chasms, and I've had some people panic modulate when crossfields open on them.
Making them a little bit more specific. One of the
Yeah.
ideas I had was giving them something of a pattern.
Maybe not the same shade of blue as the chasm as well.
I have some thoughts.
Go ahead.
Well, I mean, I could give it the same I could give it an actual beam so that it's lightning around a beam, similar to the Cyclops. And I could, change the colors so it's a little more noticeable.
Maybe do like a beam that has a quick bang zap as well. Nice lightning tonk without actually changing any of the mechanics of it. Purely
Try.
effects wise. You can play with it up and down.
It's surprisingly difficult to get electrical booms and sounds that are good.
So it's probably going to be something that in emergency we just change the hue of it, kind of thing. But we have some solutions for that. Okay, went from so many cactus to no cactus. No cactus.
I had at least 2 launchers on my team, and we completely annihilated Big Rig with them. So
Who could have predicted this? I don't know. Who could have predicted you not actually watching the tournament? Crossfield is a little bit too strong. I think it should fire slower. Definitely does have some pretty beefy values with the changes to the AMS health for the shells. We can tune them in a bit.
Can you remind me if fractional AMS damage is possible or just gets put back to 1?
It is.
is it?
It
Are you sure?
is according to the code. There's nothing forcing it in either direction. It appears to be
Okay.
functional the way you'd expect it to be. So if you got 0.5 AMS damage, it'll do half as
What?
much as 1.
Right. It was doing
Alright.
2, so I'm gonna try 1.5. I already tuned it back to 1, but I'm gonna try 1.5.
1.25 somewhere in there. Like very small variations on that will make a huge difference.
Yeah.
What's up,
Side
Sven?
note, speaking of AMS, since we are now reverting AMS pitiable shells across the board, does that mean AMS across the board is going down in points too, because they were previously priced for dealing with a lot more than they will now currently deal with?
I don't
They will
think we
have to
need-
go up in points, otherwise they are the perfect counter to every missile.
Well, the idea is that their efficacy is tuned in a bit with the amount of damage that they're shitting out constantly. So play with either the AMS damage alone, how they traverse, their points as well. Some
I
will
don't
go up,
think-
some go down.
We need to bring their points down. Like if you think you need less AMS, then bring less.
No, I was just wondering. I mean, personally, I don't think there'd be a problem if they don't change right now, but I guess that'll be remain to be seen if like there's a test tournament and everyone's missiles are now getting shut down a lot easier because the AMS is not working on shells. But I guess that would be like something to test in like the next test tournament.
At least with this, there are a lot less variables, and you can say, all right, how many points in this PD to shoot down 2 LRMs or something? And not
Also, doesn't AMS have a thing where it like goes for the highest incoming HP projectile anyway?
That's right.
So by
Which is why
definition,
the Thanatos
you're
made
not
the
losing-
best PD distraction by far.
yeah, so you're not losing a whole lot because a lot of the guns have like 20 HP, whereas the missiles have like 200. So
Yeah.
I don't think PD efficiency efficacy against missiles will change if we just cut shell HP.
Yeah,
don't
when
know.
I'm saying of moving the values around, I'm not talking half or double. I'm very small to bring them in to where they should be,
Right.
rather than trying to also deal with a bunch of shells or anything else that they're not intended to.
Well, I guess one last note on that, which will probably be brought up later anyway. But since we are removing pitiable shells, that's probably gonna flip like pretty much every how people build in general. So I was wondering, like,
meta
I
was
was
getting stale.
I mean, I'll make the argument that like having a stable meta is not a bad thing. I think people want to practice, like they don't want to constantly change their ships and more practice on like teamwork and build comps and stuff like that. I think there's value in like, you know, getting good with that too. It's like it's a little annoying having to like test to see what's the newest like secret sauce combo or what's the most efficient combo in like the current sandbox.
That is
Pretty
true,
well
which is
played,
why
yeah.
after a date, the GT qualifiers and whatnot, there will be no changes and ships will be locked in.
Yep. So the reason wanted to do these larger changes sooner than later is we're at the point where the game runs, doesn't crash, things function as far as we can tell. Any issues are related to something of our own design. And now we can really hyperfixate on the problem areas that we didn't really have the ability or time to focus on before, and just put us into a nice place. And well, post GT, there will be no changes for several months, 3 months, something like that.
You
That
said
has to be
post or
done.
pre GT?
Post pre GT, there will be a very large period of about 3 weeks of zero changes, other than emergency, like this crashes the game kind of stuff.
Well, that's what I'm worried about in terms of like pre GT. I feel like that should be the opposite, where there should be like a month or at least more pre GT where there's no changes, so people like actually get a chance
3
to test their
weeks. 3 weeks
build.
is like almost a month. What do you mean?
Yeah. I mean, like in terms of like test tournaments, that'll be only like one test tournament before the GT.
Something to that effect.
Oh, yeah.
1 or 2, maybe.
Yeah, the idea
mean-
is to just get this tested, make sure it's where we figured it out to begin with, because we did have these values in a good enough spot before we tried the point defense thing.
No, okay.
Yeah, I mean,
Because a lot of these heavier shells that did get their point defense weren't meaningfully changed aside from that since that great balance. So unless everything else has changed around them, which not too much has, they should still be where they were. And if that's still a problem, well, we could talk about it, but I don't think so.
yeah. I just know at this rate, I mean, one, we're almost at the point where we've run enough test tournaments that we could combine the first and second season as far as all of the tournaments they've ever done.
I mean,
And
be
we're still
very-
not at the GT yet.
Well, we got
You
to
say that.
216 last time, 217, forget.
I
mean, I would personally recommend at least 2 test tournaments before the GT, because that the first one, you can see like what the major changes are and people how they build, and then the second one you could see if any of that stuff is flukes from like the first one.
we only got
Unfortunately,
the 13.
we are on a timer before the 10-year anniversary of Space Engineers.
Okay.
There's going to be a big update, which Keenan has posted.
So, an alternative that I'm just coming up with on the spot, so feel free to cut me off if it starts sounding stupid, is there is some feedback on here, which we'll get to at some point, that there should be more frequent test tournaments that are smaller.
No, we did. I mean,
I remember that.
we did that, and we switched to this format because of burnout, and that was a good choice, and we should not go back.
Now,
I disagree with
is
that. Go on.
a middle position. These tournaments leading up to the GT don't necessarily need to count against or for your team in anything meaningful. They could be framed as this is just to make sure everything shakes out and it's good to go. We can do 8v8, do more fun things. Just find the really out of place, unfun things that way. Because no matter what, if there's 2 tournaments ahead of us and somebody has some extra special meme sauce, they're not going to use it until the qualifiers either way. That's
Well,
just game theory.
So do
but-
a televised tournament.
Yeah, so it'd be not necessarily 317 or 318 as a tournament. What I would want to run personally, what I've wanted to run for a while, is less serious, shorter tournaments, fewer teams. It doesn't matter if we have a shorter tournament, it's fine. Don't need to be so serious about everything. Just get asses in seats and blow up some Lego bricks. Doesn't matter too specifically much, just trying to find the bad stuff. And just getting enough people together to do that. On Saturday when you say, let's do random scrims, or we can say, well, show up with the team.
What if we did try to think of a way to put this. You know how like on ships where they used to do the impromptu boxing tournaments, everyone who wanted to participate would throw their tags in the box, and if they were participating, you could call them out.
Yeah, that's one idea, but It's more of the lead up that's the issue, because building a team and making sure everybody has a couple hours free on Saturday can be pretty hard, especially when you're dealing with more than one person. So,
What about a pick me tournament? You know, like we used to have that system where you just hit the command and some algorithms split the teams into two.
Unfortunately, that is a lost STC.
well, I could go
Actually-
back and fix it up to function, but I would need to pretty much rebuild it, because I didn't program it. That was Velcro, and Velcro has been gone for a very long time. So I'd need to
Rip.
effectively go from scratch to make that work. But if that is what is required to get what I want, then I'll do it.
It still works on my Ground Core server.
I bet it does. I'm pretty sure I know why it does. It's quite something. I can make it work in theory.
I mean, well, just going back to my original point, I just feel like we need some more rigorous testing with like under actual like combat parameters where like teams are fighting
Oh,
each
I
other
fully
before
agree.
the
I fully agree. Now,
because
finding a way to do that is the harder part, because every time I say so, somebody puts their hand up and says, no, that's a terrible idea.
What goes through your mind when you think, yeah, scrims, let's get on the server, guys, ooh, versus, all right, bros, team, let's do this.
Let's get sweaty.
Yeah, get sweaty.
This is why scrims do not work.
The pick-me scrims worked
Um,
just fine when we had pick-me. Notably, we stopped doing it when it broke.
Yeah, we stopped
is
doing it when it
true.
broke because everybody remembers how annoying and cringe it is to have to try and organize everything over everybody else screaming in a chat.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you know what's fun? Starcore Light.
Yeah, well, that's
When
fine
we
for
tested
just
that
the,
one thing, that was fine.
just for the
Alright.
functional gameplay of it. Now the
Add to the list,
What
revive
about-
pick me. I will
what
use
about
the
the
Omnisci.
Yeah.
is broken at
Yeah.
the moment.
Well, hold on. I have a question.
Good.
Couldn't we use what you set up in the team deathmatch thing as a starting point? It automatically assigns you to a team when you log in. Right?
Sure, that's great. Now I want to bring my 35k because look how cool it is. Now
Yeah,
you have
Pick
successfully
me,
ruined
yeah,
the
that.
scrim because you wanted to show your giant brick.
What if we, like,
I can fix that with a control X.
Well, we don't need to if we just fix pick me, don't we?
what if we like ask Climb or Math nicely to look at Pick Me?
Well, the
We
actual
have-
problem is the interface between ShareTrack and PickMe. PickMe is looking for something very specific at a ShareTrack, and it was changed at some point. Because I wasn't a programmer, and I'm still not a programmer, whatever I changed at some point in time made it very upset.
No,
I
it
just need to fix
was when Keen attempted to add verification to whatever chat does to stop hackers or something, and it torpedoed all of your mods because you use a jank method,
That
which
was
was
different.
the best method.
That was a different setup, and I'm talking about the specific like protobuf net calls, because it still works on Wiseman's ground core server, because the Wiseman ground core server is using a very old version of ShareTrack that predates those changes, which is why it still works.
I understand.
So it's not totally broken. It's in a state of I need to sit down, put my head down, and fix it, and work on nothing else for about a day, maybe two. And I'm pretty confident I could get it into a position where it worked fine, even better than it did before. So if that is what is required to get a bunch of ships on Saturday blowing each other up without it being just nails on a chalkboard, please get in your cockpit, bro, look, oh my god, the blockers. No, just get in your fucking ship and there you go, done. If that's all that's needed, perfect, I'll do that.
Cool.
Okay, Thanatos. You know what? No. Wiseman, you're gonna get up on a platform and talk about how cool your gun is, and I'm gonna get some water.
Yeah, so the Thanatos Impulse was ridiculous. I agree. I forgot to change it. It was originally designed for, much slower fire rate. So that's already been tuned way back. So the impulse should be a problem. Other than that, is there a problem?
Not really. I wouldn't say there's a problem. They're finally doing Thanatos things.
Yeah. So it was.
Although-
I think it was just the impulse that everybody
I didn't-
objected to, and I
didn't
totally
try
agree.
them against the Mark II coils yet, but from my initial testing, they seem to be pretty on par, which is what they used to do. So, pretty good.
I am more speaking of coils. I feel like if we do axe the pediable shells, we'll just be going back to the Magnetar Mark II coil meta.
Yep.
But
mean-
we'll see. I'm pretty sure that's exactly what's going to happen.
Yeah,
but
but here's
because
the
since
thing.
we never addressed that problem.
So
Yep.
either you have a bunch of small spam guns like Veneers and fucking Punishers and whatnot, and close range brawls, or you have long range coil cannon engagements. I don't know.
I mean, we're just like I realize that now since it's been a while, but we're literally just changing one meta for the other.
Plus, there are
We
Yeah.
we're literally changing it for the other. Like we either have the short range spam meta, which I think is more balanced, but I guarantee, because like the whole point of the pediable shells was literally people were just taking Magnetars and coils. That's it.
I mean, I would like shell HP if it made a bit more sense, because PPCs and Magnetars getting PD'd is a bit confusing to me, considering they're balls of plasma, right?
Yeah.
I tried to apply real life logic to things. It doesn't work.
Yeah, but Magnetars, I don't know. It kind of negates the point of nerfing a few guns if you're gonna make any gun that's like.
I know.
oh,
What I'm saying is make your argument from a mechanics perspective rather than a
Okay.
Yeah,
this
I'm telling
this
you that
fake
it's-
ball of plasma should be like real life plasma.
No,
I
that's
mean,
that's not the point I was gonna make. The point I was gonna make is that guns that were previously medium to long range now have to be used at short range to even have a chance to pass through PD, or use like you said, Gugniers on flechette mode that will not contribute to output. So you're sacrificing between 300 and 600 points just to have a chance of getting your damage through, which is not as great as the alternative, which is haha, paint your ship in Reavers and Veneers and Gladius and whole W, you know?
Which
Yeah,
is
but-
why we're stripping the health off of shells, yeah?
To update muzzle, they claim
Go for
we
it.
will just be swapping back to the old spam coil gun and Magnetar meta. Is
I
this true?
guarantee that's what's going to happen.
We do need to address that if we're going to get rid of shell HP.
Well,
Because like that was the best thing about the shell HP is the fact we didn't have fucking Mark II core cannon spam
Yeah,
everywhere.
Yeah.
I do agree with that.
let's test it on Saturday with a picnic.
I don't think you're going to get, because people who are invested in liking that meta will purposely not take those ships as to not get it nerfed.
Then
That's okay,
purposely
we have
bring those
other
ships as to
people.
get it nerfed.
Yeah,
I hate flying those kind of ships.
we are petty bitches here. We will take guns to get them nerfed to scrims.
Well, there you go. If you can
I mean,
definitely prove
I
it
think
beyond
we
a
can
shadow
all
of a doubt, then we can
Yeah, okay.
massage some things around.
I'm just the thing I'm bothered with about shell HP is that it's very random, in my opinion. Like Tempests and PPCs got PD'd, but the Monopole doesn't.
Well, so here's our ultimate problem. Well, one of the many problems we face with PD, right, is we've got 3 distinct classes of things that can be shot down at the moment, and all of those things are currently balanced somewhat independently. We've got shells that can be shot down, we've got missiles that can be shot down, and we have fighters and bombers that can be shot down.
Yeah.
And it's it's wildly difficult to come up with a system, because we don't have any way, we have very few ways in the code of distinguishing our targets. Like we can keep some weapons from shooting at shells, but beyond that, we don't have any way of like, this is our anti-fighter weapon, or you know what I mean? And so like getting the damage for all of those things tuned in correctly, it's quite a nightmare. We've been thinking about it for a long time.
So my issue with shell HP, like I said, it's a bit inconsistent, and what I feel like the guns that were targeted by nerfs that were supposed to be nerfed by Shell HP, say Mark II Coal Cannon, got a non-PDable alternative like an Apollo added in like a month later, which is like, okay. Before anyone says, I know it's not technically an alternative, but it does
No, I
a
get what
lot
you
of
mean.
things. Yeah,
You don't need to justify your statement. I get it. I get it.
So and then it also, like, as we spoke about before, it promotes the chiasm spam, which people seem to not like. So I don't know. I just think maybe if we don't cut it completely, because the whole Gugnir Flechette thing is a cool mechanic, at least in my opinion.
Tractor rounds, you mean?
Yeah, sorry, yeah, those. We just kind of adapt so that some guns are PDable and some aren't, and it's like more cohesive. So it's not just short range spam guns that are PDable. Or maybe make it so that guns are PDable, but they get exponentially more health the bigger they are. So
Well,
Thanatos and Mark III battleship cannons would have
I
those
would
health.
much rather find the reason why coils of magnetars are spammed.
Because it's
They're
a
good.
do everything 7-kilometer gun.
Yeah,
Inside
I would much
one-
rather fix that reason.
Okay.
They tried.
if
they
you want to
failed.
fix it, you slash their values in half, literally.
But
That's it.
then the
Good to
problem
know.
is that
we'll have space to try it. Like,
okay.
not
Yeah.
saying everything needs to stay exactly the way it is. The intent behind the PDable shells was to reduce incoming damage. What it did was completely nullified it if you brought enough, and the theory always was you should never be immune with PD. It should just reduce. But the way it shook out wasn't like that at all. That's the problem. So if this doesn't work at all, even slightly, this blows up in our face immediately and it sucks and it's horrible. Maybe we have to walk this back too. I don't think so, as we were in a much more comfortable position before. We had to consider, yeah, this gun does a lot of damage, but you could shoot it down with 3 gimbals. So is it worth 400 points or 150 points? How do you even split that?
Right.
So I still think the PD bull shells is a good idea in theory if we control for every single possible value and we have one very stable line of logic for everything, and that just wasn't the case. It can be in season 4, definitely, as we'll be starting with more or less a fresh slate to work with, decide what can stay and what needs to go, and things that might be the most viable things in the universe that you feel you are forced to bring during a tournament, but you don't like them. Well, that's not very good gameplay, is it?
Yeah.
I personally want you to be able to bring a gun that you think looks and feels cool and be able to do good with it. The onus should be on you to design a ship that looks good, flies good, feels good, and does okay without it being overwhelming to people that aren't necessarily flying whatever you're flying. So that's the general theory that I'm trying to work with. And hopefully we land on that before the grand tournament, because it would be rather unfortunate if we ran into the tournament and there's only one viable ship type.
I don't think there was ever a point in time in Starcore where there was only one viable ship type, no matter the gun balance.
I'm exaggerating.
But
There's of
I
course
think,
more.
yeah, I know. I'm sorry. It's getting late. My
Yeah.
sarcasm detector is anyway. I just think that to completely cut out shell HP this slate would be doing ourselves a disservice, because it could potentially the shell HP might have been hiding some funny stuff that would be unnoticed till the GT, and potentially
Agreed.
could cause another Somnus haha funny.
Well, I'd say we should find it first, because if we're not ready, we're not ready.
Yeah. But overall, I just think a middle ground between those two would be more favorable than just,
Well, it
Papa.
could also be the case of some weapons, like the coil cannon, just need to be point defense, but I don't really think so. Maybe higher
It
rate of
could be-
fire, longer range, high explosive guns. A
Could
few
be
of them.
that it's not a PD incentive, but also part of the gun balancing. Like, yes, it does stuff, but it can be intercepted.
Unfortunately, this is a binary issue. If
Then-
the enemy has a counter to my gun shooting them, that is the factor to consider.
Yeah.
Yes,
Rather, to make the enemy immune to whatever you're shooting at them, you just have to bring enough point defense, and 9 times out of 10, you can become immune currently from anything with health.
So pick me will be repaired. We will run scrims this Saturday. Sorry, not scrims. Don't say that word.
Pick me's.
Like, I
there
mean,
you
just
go.
quick interjection with the whole bringing up PD, you come invincible thing. Is that people bringing too much PD, or is that just people not bringing enough PD-able guns? Like,
Well, that's the contention. Why would you bring PD-able guns if the enemy is going to bring PD? Because and so on and so on. It's circular.
right, because we didn't make PD-able guns worth it.
Yeah, and to make them worth it, it would be
Ignoring PDs.
ignoring PD or making them do such an absurd amount of damage. Your only solution would be to sprint up to the enemy and just mag dump in their face and instantly
Oh.
core them.
You say that,
Bring a
but
fucking
a lot
gun
of
in
the-
with the snap around, yeah, but blah, blah, blah.
I think you're kind of overestimating how effective the Gugnir actually is, because it's not that effective.
Anyway,
It's pretty
let
effective.
us.
I've used it all the fucking time to get those cold cannon shit through.
I'm sorry. What gun are we talking about?
So
The
we're on the
Gugnir.
Thanatos
Just
last
CDs
I
in general.
left. Did we talk about the impulse on the Thanatos? Well, I believe you already
Yes.
did that.
Already
Yeah.
talked about it. It's done. We're good.
So what's
Already talked
after?
about the crossfield. Its damage, its AMS damage has been tuned and reduced somewhat. We will get that tuned into a good spot.
Yeah.
Uh,
Sorry, what was that?
We'll get
Have
to
we
that.
talked about? Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
All right, I'll wait.
Skull further down in the comments. Is there anything else? Mm,
Yeah, the crossfields do funny damage to shields and to components.
Interesting.
I've sat on a server with Squish and MTD today, and 2 crossfields handily outpaced Gladius and a T4 in shield damage, and
Listen.
then proceeded to drill through heavy armor. So
I'm going to guess there's a lot more to DPS calculations between a beam and a fake beam of projectile stream,
no,
even
it's
on a stationary
The
target.
crossfield is a beam, isn't it?
It's just a
Yeah.
beam.
Yeah.
It has very, very similar damage stats on it as the Nyx and the Mammon. Like in the configs, I have quadruple checked this. Like I'm not. So something is going wacky. Maybe it's because of multi-turret
question.
fuckiness.
is it doing Nyx damage per turret?
No,
Each barrel
Okay.
should be doing about 1
Each-
barrel, right?
each barrel is 1 barrel of a Nyx or 1 barrel of a Mammon.
Interesting. So
There,
when it engages, it should be a Nyx when 2 of them are engaging, right?
In
correct.
theory.
When 2 of them are engaging, it should be the same damage as the Nyx. It should actually be less because it's supposed to have a longer reload, and maybe that's what the problem is that its reload is not working correctly.
That could be it.
I mean,
It
we
was
can compare
for
the
sure.
two later, but
It was for
I
sure
was
melting through shields. Like that's
Yeah.
all I can tell you. The
Okay.
armor damage was more situational because you had to let them stay on target for some time. So whatever. But
Yeah. So there's a
Right.
chance that even if the values say one thing, the actual effectiveness of the weapon might not be quite right. So we'll take a look.
Yeah. We'll try and figure out what's going on with that. Half Nyx damage per barrel with half. Yeah, that's what it's supposed to be.
Yeah, that is the intent.
who's spamming
Yeah.
copium?
Because me and Tysel also tested it. And we
Tiberius.
noticed it was doing like a lot more shield damage than anything in comparable points.
It could be like there's an AoE somewhere that's doing something it shouldn't be. There's a few options here.
I'll look at the trig again.
So, right. Impulse, already did that. Gladius was one of the ones that's a bit of an odd standout because on paper it shouldn't be any different from where it was before. That might not be the case. We should definitely double, triple check that it's doing the proper amount of what it should be doing.
What should a Gladius be doing?
Probably more than it's doing right now.
Because static tests showed that it was kind of whack, but combat tests show different. So
What's this for?
other way around. Static, less combat, quite a bit.
So the Gladius
Yeah,
has
I
a lot of
used it fine.
damage in combat.
My shields got melted pretty fast in combat, though admittedly it was with
You
four of
had
them. So
2.6 gigawatts, so it's not.
that was
You
before.
have
That's
Well,
Not
like
Gladius.
something else.
it was with persons later on as well.
It'll be looked
okay.
at. See if we can find anything odd or strange about it. And if we can't, well, we'll come back to it. Thanatos. Let's see. I think that was just the particle effect too busy. More or less, because the impulse is already fixed.
Yeah.
That's okay, I can tune down the particle effect by just changing some values around. I think it's just too bright, to be honest. Don't think I was ever perfectly satisfied with it. It's at least distinct.
All right.
Impulse reduction done. Okay. Starcore Invalid Edition. LBX2, still, and shotgun. Metal Storm.
I
Keeps his
beloved.
position. Pluto. It's in a interesting place. That's for the Banshee and Tidans. They're definitely going to be affected by the point defense things, and I have been testing some theories on how to make them, go towards the target, launch, and not do the sprint to the target, turn 90 degrees, and start orbiting slowly, which, well, isn't great for a dive bomber. The Banshees are kind of affected the same way. Artificial Sun, just right-ish. They still have some interesting issues. I believe the immediate notes I had were the particle effect not being extremely consistent, in that it's not consistent at all. And I'm not sure it's using an effect and not a field, right?
It is using a field for its UR.
Sun play with field settings. Because have you tried the depletable setting yet?
No, actually, it has a lifetime through various silly means.
Yeah.
Yeah, Wiseman.
Yo.
Do the crossfields have a drop off?
No.
I believe neither do the Mammons. It might
Because
be.
my static test was from pretty close up, so that if they had a drop off could be another Electo where they do stupid damage up close, and then
No, they've only got it's a single stage ammo, so there shouldn't be anything wacky happening at
Okay,
range. There's no drop off.
I'm streaming them if you want to check. Have two of them, same test as I did before.
We'll get through the survey first.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah,
So-
let's continue on this. Thank you.
We'll just finish up here. Shouldn't be too much longer. Accidentally popped that out. Didn't mean to. Go back. There we go. Okay. Artificial Sun. Just some tweaks here and there. It's a little bit odd.
Great.
We all
Alright,
love
cool.
Discord.
In case anyone was curious, Discord just closed itself.
Huh.
Well, funnily enough,
Standing.
which we saw earlier. What the fuck?
Yeah, not too sure about what happened there, but whatever. Moving on. Multi-solid rocket booster. It's perfectly fine. Is there any problems with that? Or the afterburners? There still is an interesting issue with the 5x5 afterburner particle effect where occasionally it leaks. Is the best description I can give for
Has
it.
anyone else ever seen the 5x5 afterburner suddenly become a nebula?
Yeah, it
No.
looks very distinct and
No.
very strange. It might just be me, but I've seen it at least a few times.
Have you seen it since you got a new motherboard?
I have not. Oh no.
Really makes you think.
Anyway, the pack's pretty good. Long swords in the same position other things were. They're kind of strange here or there.
Not being touched.
We have actually touched them pretty recently to make them more compliant with the Orbits 2.0 approaches update that BDA has helpfully supplied. That has changed a few things around to reduce the likelihood of things just running into their target, which has been relatively successful. So we're still playing with it. Hangars are only useful against slow ships with no PD, which basically means the target needs to be already disabled. I agree. If you get to the PD field and the strike craft manage to fire, they won't hit the target, just moves slightly over all the subpar missiles and other PDable weaponry. I agree on the count of it being subpar because of its behavior of sprinting to the target, turning left, letting PD shoot at it, then eventually launching bomb sideways. Long swords still don't exist, right? Lol. Thank you, Androth. Bombers are borderline useless and need some form of rework. We've been working on it. I think bombers are actually worse than bringing nothing at all. Banshees are almost completely shut down if anyone has crossfield decent PD. Fighters would be fine if
That
they blocked
is
your
intentional.
well, not a huge fan of having totally worthless things on the board. So it's mostly their behavior that can be tuned around.
The Banshee, rather. I'll see my philosophy on the bombers later.
Long swords seem kind of pointless without massive HP buffs or massive damage buffs. One gimmick needs like 50k health to survive multiple passes. Cool concept, but are underperforming. Too powerful. Bad. Glorified. Fighters are actually incredible point defense. Like,
Yep.
pretty absurd, honestly.
They even shoot little micro missiles.
You pay the colossal price for the point defense fighters? Yeah, probably not. That's why I'm still tuning them in and figuring out. And now that we're not so concerned about the specter of performance, we can get more creative.
So my thought with strike craft and drones, and I guess this applies to the alias too, they can never, ever be good. They can be mediocre, but they can never be good because it is extremely unfun to be shot by them in mass. That
Well-
is my thought. I am still traumatized at what you did, Tate. You know what you did?
There is a few options, one of which is to make the fighter launch bay a reasonable size, making it cheaper. You know, a 100-point fighter box that reloads if it dies. Wouldn't be so bad for a couple 100 points.
Maybe. But at the moment, probably for the remaining of Season 3, they are, wow, cool plane.
Still not totally trusting of the system, so I haven't put too much pressure on it yet. But it is quite a lot better than it was even just last month. Okay, special questions and wrap up. Within the bounds of the current Starcore tournament, what ideas would you suggest we consider? Use the mod changelog channel again. I have for all of my stuff. There has been some slips here and there, which I apologize for. Nothing was really documented. Well, I'm doing my best, and if we do slip, there is the Git feed to keep on our asses about it. Turn on the Harm Sphere by default again. Well, I have actually added this feature if you check the mod changelogs in the server area. The harm sphere command has been removed. Now it's harm dist space and a number. And that number is how far away from center the harm sphere will render. By default, it's 9.5 kilometers, but you can make it any distance you like, such as 0. So it always renders, or 20 kilometers if you'd never want it to render. It's up to you. You do need to punch it in every match. I'm sorry. But if you forget, it will turn on when you're near it. That's the important part. No, the format was new, but more ETA before a fight would be nice. Even if you don't know who we're going to fight, you can at least ping us already that we will have a fight there. This is a good point. And I have been pondering ways of setting this up a little better rather than realizing that a fight is going to occur and then pinging both teams, but we already know who's in that slot, so we can send them along a little easier. So there's a few things we can do here to keep on top of the knowing where you're supposed to be part. Not available. Give the new blueberries a nerf before everything runs, but nothing but them and chasms. Well, the current nerf is probably too much, to be honest. Big roids near the center, so I'm going to say this again. Voxel Performance Delta is almost entirely based around the given volume of voxels you need to get through. So giant rock is less performant by far than 2 small rocks, for example. Also, get rid of the damage zone. It was something put in place in a time when we were trying to keep fights shorter. That... Okay. The reason it was put in again, after the bounce zone, was what was happening is that grids were just skating around the back of edge of it, constantly going at their top speed, being bounced around, and looking through the camera. Was it the most powerful strategy in the world? No, it wasn't. Was it just not particularly interesting at all? Yes. No. Does the damage zone cause issues?
Yeah, it doesn't move anymore.
It doesn't move, and now it is definitely going to show up, even if you forget to do the command.
Oh,
Yeah.
really?
I don't know. I mean, I kind of miss watching the giblets of my ship randomly sail by in the stream.
And there's nothing stopping us from just turning the harm zone off during the pick me fights. See how that goes. That wouldn't be the end of the world. Because it's just
Wouldn't
that
it go right
station in the
back
middle,
to-
you remove it, and then that's it.
I was to say, if you turn it off, won't it go right back to the rope bouncing that you were just talking about before?
Yep. But just see what happens. You could just try it for a match. It's not the end of the world. If this is something that people want to try, then absolutely we can try it. But now that's not a problem because they're time limited, point limited, and people frequently lose before getting wiped these days. So yeah, no need for it, and it would save a bit of headache. Lol, 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 lol. So I don't agree that there's no need for it. If you are sailing into the bounce zone, it means you're either not in control or not paying attention. Or you can't see it, and that last one should be resolved.
So we shouldn't be using it like the WWE ring.
In theory. We'll see how it goes in the pick-me's. More barriers. Well, as some of us have discovered, there is a persistent and annoying issue with some of the blocker plates where just some random positions, not even clipping into anything or getting close to anything. Some of them just existing seem to cause very weird, very strange performance issues that don't even show up on the Shift F11 thing, so it's like they're appearing before any of the game, and it's getting pretty upset about that. So
Yeah, I've turned off the massive ones from appearing in the random spawns. And if that fixes it, then we'll know that for sure.
yeah.
Cool.
At this point,
Probably a threshold.
sleep
yeah,
schedule. Muzzman was downright delirious by then, so again, unfortunately, my computer had a catastrophic failure and its motherboard died. And it was either that or we just didn't have a bracket that was anything but saying fuck you to 3 of the teams. Single elimination, which was the plan to begin with. Take a month off.
Didn't we already do that?
Well,
After the GT.
over to GT, highly suggest having a few tournaments with 0 changes to weapons. That is my intent after this change. Extremely broken. Teams can actually test builds and how they work. Straight GT winners can be the team that exploits whatever overpowered weapon combos they've been keeping to themselves, which isn't a good look. Well, the term PD power creep has been thrown around instead of nerfing or buffing. What if we gave guns like the Mark 18 and 21 APM one alternative to make them non-PDable? What if we just made them non-PDable to begin with?
Yeah.
Thank you for participating. If you have any further remarks for the team, please feel free to convey them to us here. Keep up the good work. Don't like 8v8s. They make my team not be able to scream at each other for 20 minutes during a fight.
What?
Is that you, Odd?
I'd not be able to.
I think it's a meme.
It's probably you, Odd, because they just scream at each other for a solid 20 minutes.
Listen here, children.
Well, hang on. It's
Use words.
Old man to business.
Yes, yes.
Wait,
I'm
hold
an
on.
old
Are
man.
you guys joining all in one chat during 8v8s for your side?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what we
Yeah,
did.
looks like it.
Yeah, that's what
Oh.
our guys did.
The
that
intent was to have
was
like 2 independent squads. That's what I thought it was always being done.
No.
yeah.
You often take your
No.
own, don't worry.
No, everyone's gonna dump into the same chat so you can yell properly. But that would be my suggestion: is to break up the teams into 2 squads and communicate general information via faction chat, so you have 2 tightly controlled squads rather than a giant mess.
I don't know. TGS, how was it working with my guys?
Fine. We were a tightly 8 squad.
Yeah, see? As long as you can, use words, you'll be fine.
I think I'm the only one who actually talks on TGS, but
That's fine. As long as somebody talks.
Consider shorter
So-
tourneys on a weekly basis throughout limited TTs every week. This will give you more frequent testing data intervals and will allow everyone to compete at the same frequency as they do now if you manage it right. Lol. Also, it's pretty wild when y'all get cranky and cringe towards the end of the match when viewers start pointing out glaring imbalances, so shorter, more frequent tourneys might have a redouble benefit there. Now, I agree, and I very much
Australians.
apologize for everything I said during that last fight. The reason that I got a bit upset was instead of watching the last fight, we were now getting upset that we got to the final bracket and then lost instead of watching the fight and leaving it till after. And that, I won't say that's correct. I won't say that's right. I'm sorry.
I'm not going to apologize for whatever I said. But I don't even remember what I said.
Yeah, when the last fight is going on, I would prefer it if it was just about the last fight.
Yeah.
It was a fun time for all, even if Punishers caused a stir. Really like the 2v2 brackets to start off, 2v2 teams. Imagine a world where all ship types are viable and not just fast ships with spammy guns. Won't someone nerf the meta created by the god tier duo of Chasms and Punishers?
I got you, boss.
Bet the next update is going to be for the SC 10th anniversary. Should wrap up before then. Good job on stream. We didn't go that much over time, even though we ran a lot more matches this time around, though it's just finding some way to have multiple cameramen per screen. Like, more than invalid? Or swapping, like I did that one time. Probably swapping like I did that one time. I agree that was a very nice setup. It does require a little bit of setup, though. And I definitely was not in the state to do it at that time, but I agree.
What do you want? Like 5 cameramen? Jesus.
Oh, yeah,
Uh,
speaking... Sorry, go ahead.
The idea would be everybody would be using their side stream to me, and I would be clicking on a panel of camera views to pick the most interesting one, which worked out pretty well when we tried it.
Mm.
So Turnip has made a argument in the chat for increasing the points of the crossfield a little bit, and I think I agree. So I think adding 25 points, bringing it to 275, along with the rest of the adjustments, and we'll see how that works out.
275.
Yeah, 275.
Oops, I heard 225.
Yeah.
Kit. STTT is super excited for the next one, so am I. All right, that closes out all the stuff here. I believe Anomaly wanted to say something.
shield gun.
Oh, just remarking about the
Say the line, Bart.
heal gun. What?
All right, so for the heal gun,
Yeah.
I'm gonna break your heart here and say putting it in the GT is probably a bad idea across the board.
That was
Now,
worth a shot.
there is nothing stopping us from trying it in the pick-me's and seeing how it does.
I can live with that.
Like, if it's the
I'm
best
gonna
thing ever and it's the most amazing thing and it's cool and it's awesome and it adds a lot of fun, maybe we can put it in the GT. But just to check to see how it's doing, probably just leave it for season 4.
Oh,
I'm assuming
So
this
close.
is the overshield generator you added to the sheet.
Yeah.
Yes, I was recommending it be added. I do not think it is offensive. It is an offensive weapon, balance wise. It
Yeah.
is intentionally subpar. It's neat, not optimal. Kind of cool if you want to bring it. It's not going to the 2 minute 1 gigawatt, and that's how it begin.
Well, that's
Otherwise,
why I say let's put the brakes on it for having it in the GT, but try it in the pick-me's, see how it does. Tune it in exactly just right so we hit the ground running next season. That seems like the best option to me. There was a bit of miscommunication there, which was my fault. I'm sorry.
Yeah. That was
I
worth a
think
shot.
honestly, with reactors being reverted to saner levels of shield, I don't think it's as offensive as it would be with the 40% free shields on top. Because
That is a good point.
one of the usage case. So it's a relatively slow moving projectile weapon that heals shields. So naturally, probably the most popular usage will be a portable fort machine. So you just have a teammate shoot you to fort up real quick. I don't think that's the worst idea, because from my testing, it does not let you heal yourself. So it is a bit gimmicky, yes, sure, but I don't think it's busted to the point where it would be as game breaking as the arcane stuff, in my opinion. So I don't know.
Maybe
Because
scale.
it's a pretty hefty price. It's 400 points for a 2-minute recharge, which is also very heavy on the power. And you can only heal your teammate, and it doesn't heal that much. Like, it heals, sure. It gets you, tops you up on a fort, but it's not like, oh, I can recharge 120 million shields with like one shot, you know?
Which is why I say we'll see how it does in the pick-me's. If
Okay.
it's a positive addition and not negative in any way, if it seems like a good idea to add, fine. Because we are going to need to be testing a lot of stuff. There's going to be a lot of ground to cover.
Yeah. So provisionally, we can pick these.
Yeah. Still in that weird soft position. And I don't like taking that position.
Also, Demon Fox does make a good point. I don't think pick-me's are the best way to test a team-oriented gun.
they will be a lot better than scrims,
Okay, that's true.
and that's good enough.
TM.
So for the pick-me's, we'll just have our teams picked, and then we just stick with it for the rest of the time.
In theory. We'll see exactly how we want to play with that, but you know,
Maybe.
bring something, see if it's usable, see if it's broken, see if it's a problem.
Okay.
See if it does anything unexpected. You know, weird stuff like that. Like, oh, when you fire it, I can't see any hit scan weapons anymore for 5 seconds. You know, stuff like that.
Fair enough.
Yeah. Because on paper, don't hate the idea. Remember, there was, no, it still is on the Jotun, the heal.
Yeah, it's still on there.
So chat is considering making it hit scan.
He has made it hit scan.
So
I thought it was
is hit
already.
scan now.
The heal part?
What's it scan?
Yeah.
Yeah,
the heal
part.
part on the Jotun. The heal ammo.
So they're now
So
actually pretty
the
easy to
theory
use.
works and isn't broken, which is why I'm kind of being soft on this, really soft. Bottling it into its own specific system that could be targeted for any changes, I don't think is the end of the world. So we'll try it and see how it goes. So that's the general theory here. I'm going to be working on Pick Me first before anything else, making sure that actually functions. And guaranteed by Saturday, we will have something to work with, even if I need to do it the hard way. That should be good. Anything else?
No.
Easy enough. That'll be Balance Council for 317. Not exactly what I wanted to end this with, but it's better than everything being hyper laggy and crash worthy. So we are moving in the correct direction over time. And hopefully this point defense thing doesn't immediately turn around and bite me in the ass. I hope it's positive.
Yeah, I think it'll be fine.
I'm less confident. But
Another
that's
week
me.
of the guns getting used, getting nerfed. Yeah, the only nerfs, the specific nerfs, would be the Chasms and Punishers, and whatever their current settings, those will be adjusted. They're definitely too low. How low? Not sure, but they're too low right now. And I am sorry if you picked a gun and it was your favorite, and you're having a lot of fun with it. There's just only so much I can do. There's the notes posted in chat. I think that'll bring